All right, welcome. I'm Juan Rivero, Director of Special Projects at Village Preservation, and I want to, first of all, welcome you and thank you for joining us this evening. Before we start, let me say a quick word about Village Preservation. We have been documenting, celebrating, and fighting for the preservation of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo since 1980. We work to expand landmark and zoning protections and stop inappropriate development in our neighborhoods while also encouraging appropriate development. We host roughly 75 programs per year, most of which are free and open to the public. And these events are meant to illuminate the cultural and architectural heritage, history, and depth of our communities and the value of their preservation. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization, so your involvement and support mean a great deal to us. You can learn more at our website, villagepreservation.org, and please consider becoming a member or making a donation if you're able to at villagepreservation.org/donate. I want to make one final note before we get going about Zoom protocol. This event will be recorded. Please feel free to use the chat function to say hi, tell us where you're joining from, or raise any issues or thoughts if you have that you might have. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use instead the Q&A function, which helps us better keep track of them. And you can do that at any point during the talk. We'll get to as many of those as we can following the talk. All right, so I'm very excited to be hosting tonight this panel, Neighborhood Bookstores in the Age of Amazon, in anticipation of Independent Bookstore Day, which happens to be on Saturday. This national commemoration comes during a critical period for independent bookstores and for small business in general. A pandemic has wreaked havoc on local commerce, suppressing foot traffic and intensifying a turn towards online shopping, a flight towards Amazonia, if you will. This current crisis, however, has perhaps made us lose sight of the fact that this has been only the latest installment in an ongoing battle for small business survival. We have all noticed the vacant storefronts, some of them chronically vacant, like gap teeth in what used to be and should be toothy smile commercial corridors. And when it comes to bookstores, it seems like each generation introduces a new existential crisis. First, the television was going to reduce us to couch-ridden passive consumers of the moving image. Then chain bookstores were going to drive their far smaller, independent-minded counterparts out of town. Ebooks were going to relinquish print to museums and underutilized musty libraries. And most recently, social media apps were going to reduce our attention span to that of gerbils. And they may yet, in which case, unless they start publishing really small 280 character books, you get the idea. And then every few years, we get a lamentful article. There was one in the New York Times just a few days ago, either quantifying the loss, 380 plus bookstores in New York City in 1950 to fewer than 80 today, or perhaps documenting the unquantifiable with pictures and reminiscences of Brentano's, Scribner's, Colosseum, the Gotham Book Mart, Doubleday, Bookmasters, our own St. Mark's Bookshop. And I'll stop there before I drive us all to tears, because through the tears, it's hard to see the great bookstores that actually endure and the ones that have improbably opened their doors for the first time. And lamentations are great over a drink, but lamentations over losses will help us neither shore up what we have nor consolidate our gains. So this conversation is in part going to be a celebration of current independent bookstores in our neighborhoods, and is also going to be an exploration of how these places manage to survive and thrive, of the challenges they face, of how we might reverse their longstanding decline, and crucially, why we should What do neighborhood bookstores do that social media and their outrage algorithms can't? And to help us tackle these questions, we have with us three distinguished panelists. I'm not going to do a full introduction because I want to open by having them tell us their story. But briefly, we have with us Erin Neary from Book Club Bar at 197 East 3rd Street in the East Village, Jim Drugas from the Unoppressive Non-Imperialist Bargain Bookstore at 34 Carmine Street in Greenwich Village, and Emmett Pinsky from Printed Matter at 38 St. Mark's in the East Village. And so we're going to start with a short presentation by each of them. Then I'm going to raise a few questions and lead a discussion. And finally, we'll open it up to questions and comments from the audience. And I expect we'll be done at around 7:15 or so. So to the panelists, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And I was hoping you would lead us off by giving us an introduction to your respective bookstores and to you, how and why you ended up running a bookstore. Tell us about your business in some detail, what sets it and its clientele apart, if it has changed over the years or departed from what you first envisioned. Tell us about that and give us a sort of virtual tour. And we're gonna go in that order, Erin and then Jim and then Emmett. And I'm going to turn off my video so as to not distract you, but I'll be here. So take it away, Erin. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. So I'm Erin Neary. I am the co-owner with my husband, Nat Eston, of Book Club Bar. We're located at 197 East 3rd Street and Avenue B. I'm really happy to be here because all three of the stores that we're talking about today do something really different. And I think we all have a lot to learn from each other. We're all figuring out how to survive as an indie bookstore during COVID in New York City. So lots to discuss. So thank you for having me. So a little bit of background on me and the store. So we actually opened in November 2019. So we're a fairly new store. I don't have the traditional books background of a bookstore owner. I majored in English, so I certainly have always had a love of books, but I went to grad school for nonprofit management. I worked in development for nonprofits for a while before switching to marketing for some tech companies. I did, social media management, event planning, website and content management, but nothing specific to books. Nat, my husband, worked in music business for a long time, also as a musician, which he still does. So we both had this mutual love of books. We actually met in a book club in 2011. So we have kind of a meet cute story between the two of us. And it was really in the last years of my working in tech companies where I was just unfulfilled and kind of always had this idea percolating about a bookstore that we really started to talk seriously about what that might look like, what that might entail. I left my marketing job in 2018 to start pursuing the store full time. I had about a year where I just did as much research as I possibly could. I talked to consultants. I ran the numbers. I did financial projections. I had a very extensive business plan developed, which I then used to seek financing for the store. And we finally realized that it was in fact feasible, that there was something like what we wanted to do was lacking in the part of Alphabet City that we're in. And it made sense to do. So what we're doing is a little different than a traditional bookstore. We are a general new bookstore. We don't do used books at all. We're a new store, but we also are a bar that serves coffee, beer, and wine. So we're very much a hybrid space. About 50% of our sales from books, the rest is the bar, which really, those margins are really what help sustain us. And the goal was always to create a very cozy, welcoming environment where you could buy a book and then sit and read, sit and meet other people, fellow book lovers, and just kind of have a general community space, which we're finally able to do with some of our event programming. So we signed a lease in August 2019, and we opened our doors a few months later. We were waiting on our beer and wine license when we first opened, so we kind of opened just as a soft launch with the intention of doing a big grand opening when our license finally came through. Our beer and wine license was approved in April 2020, so we never had the big grand opening that we had anticipated. You can imagine, I have to talk about what COVID has done to our business, because we barely had a chance to get started before the whole world fell apart. So I want to talk a little bit about our experience operating through COVID, and how I think the things that I think we've done that have been really successful in ensuring kind of long-term survival. So we, like everyone, we shut down immediately. We had about six or 8 weeks of just, doors completely closed to the public. We were very fortunate that we had a website and e-commerce aspect of our business that was up and running on like day one of our lockdown. So we were able to do shipping. We shipped books right away. We were still able to physically go into the store and like grab those boxes from UPS, get the books out to people as soon as possible. One of the things that we did at first, we saw how delayed shipping had been with USPS. We had books that were supposed to be going 2 blocks away that were routed to Florida and whatever. And we're finally like, this is silly. It's silly to ship books to people that live blocks away just because they're not allowed to come pick it up in the store. So my husband, Nat, started doing bike deliveries. He was biking books all over the city, as far north as 109th Street, as far south as Park Slope. He was doing about 20 to 40 miles a day. And as a bookstore, we were a new bookstore that a lot of people hadn't discovered yet. And COVID actually kind of gave us a rare opportunity for people outside of the East Village to discover us. We found that people, when they were locked inside, they were literally just Googling like bookstore near me. Like they hadn't known where to get any source of entertainment from in terms of books. So they discovered us because of COVID. And for a while, if you remember, Amazon was deprioritizing non-essential items. So we were actually delivering faster in New York City than Amazon was, which we're very proud of. So we did that for a while. And then in the interim, we went through all of the phases of restrictions on what we were able to do as the bar, as the cafe. We did, outdoor seating only, indoor alcoholic drinks with food, 25% capacity, browsing only, 30% capacity, temperature checks, contact tracing, you name it. So because we are this hybrid business, we had to follow all of the restaurant protocols through all of COVID. So much of our early time in business was really just survival mode. But we finally gotten to a point where we're really busy. We're now able to be open at full capacity. We have consistent staffing. It's not just me and Nat behind the bar every single day for 200 days straight. So it's really allowed us to step back and focus more on bigger picture stuff of long-term planning for the store, and really focus on programming and curation. So like I said, we are a fairly small bookstore. We stock about 3,500 titles. So it's small, but it's still robust, I would say. The selection's very curated. We do about 40% literary fiction. We also do, poetry, mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, memoir, politics. We have a great little East Village specific section that I love because it's fun to help people discover all of the cool writers and artists and thinkers and musicians that have lived in this neighborhood. So that's always exciting, especially when there are new people to the neighborhood that don't know much about the East Village. So that's fun. Our clientele has ended up becoming a little more diverse in age than we expected. So we were really excited about. We expected, having a bar attached to the name, that it would be a lot younger, and that really hasn't been the case. I mean, people of all ages, any given day on the bar, you can see someone with like their small child shopping for books, a student studying, an older person drinking wine. like there aren't a lot of bars in the East Village where you can find that broad of a group of people inside. So that's really exciting. We think that we've created a really kind of welcoming, inviting space. As for programming, now that our COVID restrictions are loosened, we're finally able to do a lot of the event planning that we had always originally set out to do. So we're doing, kind of the typical author reading signings events where the authors are in conversation with someone else. We're doing a monthly poetry night. And then we also have some kind of what I consider like literary adjacent events. They're not necessarily book events, but they're kind of just smart, fun events for just community building. So we do every Monday night, we do drinking and drawing. We have an artist come in and guide. We have about 40 people every week that show up to do figure drawing on Mondays. We've just started doing an adult spelling bee, which is as fun as it sounds. And we've done some writing workshops and things like that. We've also done a few non-book events. We had a florist come in and we did a pop-up for Valentine's Day. So we're looking to partner with other local businesses and do some non-book events such as that. We're still new. We're still figuring out the type of event programming that we want to do, what our audience wants and what makes sense for us. But it's an exciting time to be at the store that now that we're finally able to do what our original goal had set out to be. So I think that's it for me for now. I'm sure we'll come back when we want to answer some questions, but feel
Thanks
free
so much.
to ask me whatever. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks so much. Jim, you want to take a crack at it?
Hi. Well, I'm actually here live in the store. It's outside now and showing you a little bit of the store. Yeah, so this we've been doing this bookstore for now it's going on 30 years, 31st year. We're kind of at the end of our current geographic tether. We need to move on we had to make an agreement with our new landlord as of almost a year ago to move on to a new location. We don't know where yet. We're open to ideas, but by the end of June, we have to get cleared out. But I do have some interesting prospects coming along, which I won't go into. I started out, really, I've been selling books for going on 45 years, basically, as originally in terms of retail. Then I sidetracked into wholesale for many years, exporting books but really very much what I do now. And it was a kind of model. The biggest client I had overseas was in Germany, a company called Zweithaus and Dines, which was remarkably alternative, very in their own way, huge sensation, had bookstores all over Germany and a catalog. And they were kind of an inspiration, and they would bring container loads, 40-foot containers of books over from here through me every couple of months or every month sometimes. I had other choice clients overseas. So this store was kind of an outgrowth of that, and in a way modeled a little bit after what they were doing ideologically and otherwise. We don't sell full price books. We don't sell used books. We focus, like there used to be a lot of bookstores in England that were just like this too, that were another bit of an inspiration, but would just do only bargain books, which is to say, the best of which are sometimes full price bookstores will have a table or two of bargain books. Maybe the Strand is another model. Fred Bass was a good friend. I would often supply him with overruns from what I got for export. Essentially, it's been a lot of fun. We get people from all over the world. We get, as Erin said, book lovers are all shapes, forms, ages. There's like, and the wonderful thing, I think that one of the things that helps us survive as booksellers in New York is how much New Yorkers love books. I guess every tourist that comes in is an honorary New Yorker in that sense too, in a way. students, children. I mean, we've had in 30 years, the most cutest thing is when you get someone who's now 40 years old and walks in a little bit, sentimental about how much they used to love coming here as a child. So I find that Aaron, your story was very endearing. It's like wonderful that you were able to succeed in spite of all the entanglements of COVID that came about. We also, of course, had the same situation. On the other hand, too, I think for each of us, perhaps there's a certain degree of leniency that came out of it too. Perhaps, not always. So looking towards the future, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sort of like I would call it cautionary skepticism. I mean, I feel like something is going to break somehow for us. We've been really our success was always driven by I mean, until COVID came along, we were always reasonably successful. We always managed to make it work. I think an important factor is being more than just a bookstore, which is whether it's serving drinks or any number of other events. And as I know, Printed Matter would do also, reaching, being kind of like, for example, when Trump was elected, it was like we were like a therapy place for people. They would come around to the bookstore because they didn't know where to go to be out of sheer dismay over that. It was, we would have, I actually put a sign, that we would provide therapy for people who are suffering from that. So we have always had a very strong following. I think that what's important now in contrast to what the internet does with Amazon and on the other hand too, Wi-Fi and such has given us this accessibility that where people find us on Google or Yelp and they have a place to go. They have this bookstore right around the corner or a few miles away. And they love the name. Unoppressive, non-imperialist bargain books always becomes a big magnet for so many people. My hope is to find a situation that's also like perhaps literally sharing. I think Emmett mentioned that you share with a gallery. That may well be the way we go, to share with an art gallery. We have some prospects there. I'd love to be still right here on Carmine if possible, but that's another prospect. Just to sum up, the bookstore was also for us a team. My wife was the first person to make it her baby before we had children. We had 2 kids who are grown up now. It was always very important to them throughout their growing up here, literally in the same building. We lived behind the store in an apartment. That's all always been a strong factor in how we kind of grew into the community with the community. I think it's an ongoing thing. It's always, it may well be that it'll be a kind of eternal manifestation of relationships, like the collective unconscious of the village, if you like. And I'll turn it back to you, Juan.
Jim, before we move on from you, could you touch a little bit on your selection, how you curate your selection? If you could give us example of the kind of programming that you used to do. And finally, if you could explain the name of your store.
Right. So starting backwards, unoppressive in the sense that we're very accessible in price, but also, it also implies a certain amount of, certain ideological approach too. In other words, there's a very strong left-leaning aspect to it, non-imperialist, meaning we're not Amazon. We're not trying to take over the world, but at the same time, of course, we're anti-imperialist too. The selection of books has a lot to do with what's available. So I'll go to sources, and we have a handful of sources that basically sort either returns from Kmart or Costco or Barnes and Noble, and from the publishers who send truckloads to a big giant warehouse, and then I go scoop up 50 each of whatever really makes sense for us. And I'm very particular about what I bring in, very careful, but it's not the newest or the mainstream sort of book. I think in a way, it's astonishing that, for example, I could sell hundreds of a title if it's the right book for us, and it's not by any means the typical bestseller book in any bookstore. It might be hundreds of copies of Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, or right now we still have a lot of James Baldwin. We're selling every day like 5, 10, 15 pieces, and just because they're half price. But getting them is the tricky part, and that is to say, it's getting to the source at the right moment when they have a nice quantity of the best ones. I've always been really good at that, but it also requires a degree of hoarding. And it's astonishing, even when sometimes I over order, I get 150 of something I only meant to get 50 of, and it's still gone in a matter of 6 weeks. And just, it still blows my mind too, to this day. I mean, it's, I think so. Also, I think when you stack up 50 or 20 of something on a table, it really sells a lot faster than when you only have 2 on the shelf. It's like people just get, they just get motivated by the sheer volume of a certain title, which they recognize perhaps, or they quickly begin to recognize.
And programs?
Oh, you mean like events and such?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we since COVID, it's a little more difficult, but we've had a bunch. We've had people just kind of reach out, and we have, for example, all the tables in the middle of the floor have wheels. One of the film crews that came in to do a movie here just provided wheels for every table we've got, so we could push them all aside and have lots of space in the middle with lots of folding chairs. We've had comedy shows. We've had all kinds of various events, of course, readings, signings. My favorite may be when Paul Krasner from the Realist magazine zoomed in like this in front of a large audience on a large screen here for the first time in a long time. And he was interacting with lots of old friends from back in the days of the Yippies, and talking about the Jerry Rubin book that was just being released. Gosh, there are countless little moments like that, but sometimes more personal, birthday parties, children reading from Little Red Schoolhouse, or my own kids' school careers, doing readings in front of their friends, or just tours of the store. They still come around frequently. But I mean, in a way, it feels to me as if every day is a little mini event. I mean, I'm always having fun interacting with the crowd that's in the store at any given moment, and it's more than just a singular customer relation. It's sometimes it expands into a whole bunch of people. So for example, someone gets all excited out loud about a James Baldwin book of his FBI files, and then I interjected out loud that we could also provide her with her own FBI files if she'd like. And I'm just hit a interesting. She was a little dismayed, but it was fun to see the reaction of everyone around her. And so it's I think it's important to as a bookseller, more than perhaps your average small business, you really need to have a relationship with the crowd whether it's through events or through day-to-day interaction. You know, there's, I feel as if I'm always kind of um, on the spot.
All right, thanks a lot, Jim. Emmett, you want to close off this first portion of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with both of you, Jim and Aaron. I was very interested by I think that we're going to have a lot to talk about, a lot of things in common and some differences that I think will be interesting to speak on after this. My name is Emmett Pinsky, and I'm the bookstore manager at Printed Matter St. Mark's. We are located on the first floor of Swiss Institute, which is another arts nonprofit, and they are exhibition spaces. And we're at the corner of 2nd and St. Mark's. So Printed Matter St. Mark's is relatively new. We opened in the summer of 2018. And we are Printed Matter's second location. So Printed Matter itself has been around with a physical storefront since 1976. So we're really excited to open this new location and sort of be a bit more downtown, which is, Printed Matter's birthplace. And our other store, is in Chelsea on 26th and 11th. So we sell artist books, zines, prints and editions, and we have also a selection of rare and out of print books, older, more historical titles. So the books that we have are a selection curated by me from our larger catalog overall in our larger Chelsea store. And I do tend to, when I can, focus on books, especially in the rare and out of print books, on titles that are by artists who are from New York or from downtown New York specifically, East Village even better. So that's something that I focus on that sets Printed Matter St. Mark's apart from Printed Matter broadly and gives us a bit of a focus. And so our focus really is on the neighborhood in our book selection as well as our programming, which I'll touch on a bit later. A little bit about how I came to work at Printed Matter. I've been here for 4 years. I actually started right around the time that St. Mark's opened. And I was in school in Boston, and a printmaking and bookbinding professor of mine told me what Printed Matter was and told me that I should go check it out. And I did, and I've, been here for a long time now. So yeah, I sort of come into this world originally with a focus on sort of the craftsmanship of books, on bookbinding and books as sort of sculptural objects, and that still is something that I'm very, interested in. And then of course, my role as the bookstore manager is, very expansive. I mean, you were both mentioning how, your bookstores are more than just a bookstore in this way. You have programming, you have the bar, Aaron. And so for me, when I tell people that I am a bookseller, run a bookstore, I also have to be like, but we also do all this other stuff, this programming and like window exhibitions and fairs. And that's something that I really love about working at Printed Matter. The sheer variety of things that we like just get up to. And, working in a bookstore and an arts nonprofit in general was not in any sort of plan that I had for myself. Not that I had that, solid of a plan, but nonetheless, I'm so happy to have landed here and to be able to be around these books, these artworks, be able to sort of, stretch my, research muscles in doing work about the rare and out of print books. And then also just, we are in such a lively location in the East Village, and the people that come in are so varied. We have a really broad clientele, I would say. not the least of which, because we share the space with Swiss Institute. So I would say that it's about 50-50, the people who come in for printed matter specifically versus Swiss Institute specifically. So we both, as organizations, really benefit from each other's presence there in expanding our audience. And I think that that's been pretty essential as we, sort of get on our feet as a new bookstore. So yeah, obviously I'm not in the bookstore right now. So I have some photos that I would like to share and tell you all a bit about some programming that we do. When COVID hit and we closed until I think mid-August, maybe early September, myself and the previous bookstore manager had a lot of time to sort of think about the ways that we were going to grow Printed Matter St. Mark's on top of, simply being a retail location. Because, as we're saying, it takes so much more than that to be sustainable financially as a business. So we, established a series of fundraising editions for our store specifically, where we would collaborate with artists to make usually prints, and they would donate their artwork in time. And they, the edition is a fundraiser for our store. We've established a series of window exhibitions in the store. We have these nice windows that we've used as a spot for artists to do site-specific installations. And yeah, so let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, is that working? Can someone unmute?
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome, great.
Well, you started sharing. Okay, there you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is the bookstore. As you can see, that's one of the windows. So this window installation was highlighting some submissions we got when at the beginning of COVID, we put out an open call for mail art. And so the store was closed. So over 10 weeks, about myself and my coworker got about 700 pieces each of mail art to our personal apartments. So that was really amazing as a thing to have during that first lockdown period. And then once we reopened, we put a lot of them up in the windows. Let's see, how do I move on? There we go. Jim and Aaron, we also do, classic readings, launches, signings, that sort of thing. We're really lucky to have access to the rooftop of this building, which is pictured here, and it's just has been an amazing asset since COVID, specifically, as we need outdoor spaces to host larger scale events. So these are two events that I had last October, I believe. And we also host workshops. Before COVID, we had consistent bookbinding workshops in the upstairs section of Swiss Institute, and those were led by an artist and former Printed Matter staff person, Yuchen Chang, and those were really lovely, and we missed having those so much. And we just recently had our first workshop since the onset of the pandemic, and we actually partnered with Abrams Arts Center to do a printmaking and bookbinding workshop, and that's what you see on the left there. And so hopefully we're going to continue that collaboration. And, I'm sure I'll mention this again, but collaboration with other artists, other nonprofits, other bookstores has been essential for us in maintaining a sort of momentum and accelerating a momentum and getting the word out about our store, really. And then on the right is an event that we had to launch our store tote bag that has artwork by Ray Johnson on it. So, and also in a continuation of our sort of mail art fixation over the last few years, we did a mail art making workshop, and that was really lovely as well. And then finally, this is sort of the newest thing for us. Last year, we produced, co-hosted with 8 Ball Community, which is another arts nonprofit. They're totally volunteer run, and they're sort of our neighbors in the East Village. We put on our first East Village Zine Fair that was last June. We occupied the entire block of St. Mark's between 1st and 2nd, so right outside the store. Got a bunch of city permits to totally close the street, and hosted about 45 exhibitors, artists, small presses, some bookstores as well. And we also hosted concurrent programming at 7 neighborhood community gardens, workshops, zine exchanges, that sort of thing. And this was honestly a really inspiring experience for me, being a part of organizing this. For many of the exhibitors, it was the first fair that they had done in person since COVID started. And so it was just really amazing feelings all around that day. And we're going to be announcing this sort of officially in a few weeks, but we are going to do another one this year, and we're well underway with preparation for that. So I really am excited for all of that as well. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I think that something that I have experienced in a really lovely way since working here is just, I've learned so much about the neighborhood from a variety of different sources, most of all being the people that come into the store. You know, I learned about the history of the building. It used to be a Chase Bank, and then it was actually another bank before that. Actually, someone comes in and says, this used to be a Chase Bank, probably once weekly. So I really know that now. But really just so much about the neighborhood. And that's been great. It's, you know, sort of maintains my focus on building a store that's not just a retail space, but a community space, really, that is conducive to people gathering, to artists in this neighborhood specifically being supported, being you know, given a platform to promote their work, to sell their work, because that's very important, obviously. So that's been a real highlight for me. And I think, you know, for us, since COVID, you know, we've actually, in terms of foot traffic, in terms of sales, been growing and expanding, which is, you know, in some ways surprising and in some ways not, because our focus for the last 2 years has been on things that are public facing, that are collaborations, that really just sort of, as I said previously, get the word out about the store. I think it's really a matter of letting people know that you're there as a resource, as a space, as somewhere that is a hub really for people that are doing creative things in the neighborhood. So that's just been totally essential for us, and I think is the reason that we are sustained today. Yeah, I think that's all for me.
Emmett, could you say a quick word about how you curate your selection and whether your interest in books as physical objects informs that process?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess I'll start printed matter overall. How we get our books, a lot of them are submissions. So we have an open submission system, and it's free to submit. So if anyone here has a book project that you feel would be, you know, appropriate for printed matter, I encourage you to submit your work. And we, you know, we take things from submissions, and then we have ongoing relationships with different presses, different artists, and then some of the larger artist book distributors like DAP, Idea, that sort of thing. So it's quite a range. And then for me specifically at St. Mark's, you know, it's a balancing act of taking things that, you know, are my personal taste. I'm kind of laughing because I do definitely tend to bring over some of the more experimental stuff, which isn't always the stuff that sells well. So that's what I mean when I say it's a balancing act of bringing over things that I personally find really interesting and things that I know are going to be successful from a retail sense. And obviously there's a ton of overlap there. And I think that, you know, because we pay attention curatorially to our stock overall, it's easy to do that. But I definitely, when I'm engaging with people in the store, because that is my background, or one part of my background, that's what I will talk to people about and will tell people about. And it's, the store is small and it's usually just me working there. So I do have a lot of one-on-one interaction with people. And, a lot of people come in who don't know what an artist book is, have never heard of it. And that's one of my favorite things as well, to be able to introduce that to someone and say like, okay, an artist book can be a lot of things. Here's, one thing, and that is like totally an interesting project. And then another thing that's completely different. And we're going to say they're both artist books, and, share these qualities of thinking about a book as, an art form itself, as the book as the piece of art. So really, to answer your question, yeah, it totally informs what I bring over.
All right, thank you. So let's, if everyone can rejoin. I just had a few questions. If anyone in the public has any questions, please drop them off in the Q&A box. I wanted to first of all ask you about, this is sort of like a multi-part question, for you to tell us about the biggest challenge that you face, and how you handle your biggest competitors, whoever you conceive those to be, and how you face that challenge. I know that we're coming out of a crisis, so that brings with it its own complications. But as we emerge from it, what do you see as the biggest obstacle towards thriving as a bookstore in your respective locations? Let's start with Aaron, or whoever wants to jump first.
Sure. I mean, I obviously already talked at length a lot about COVID initially being our biggest challenge. But competition wise, Amazon will always be our biggest competitor. One thing I will say is that particularly during and as we're coming out of COVID, I think more people are very active about saying to us that they are choosing to support an indie bookstore as opposed to Amazon. They're much more conscious than they were before about where they're spending their money, because they saw and continue to see, bars, restaurants, retail shops all over the city that just never came back. And they see a lot of empty storefronts, and they like the space and they don't want it to go away. So for us, whether that's, buying a coffee from us here and then, and for people who aren't maybe as much of an avid reader that might have otherwise gone to Amazon, if they only buy a few books a year, or they're buying books as gifts, we're more top of mind to them. And it's more important for them to feel like their money is going toward a place that they spend time in. So I think that, Amazon will always be our biggest competitor. I still have friends and family that'll tell me that they got a book on Kindle. And I'm just like, what? How are you still doing this? I'm a bookstore owner. So it's always going to be there. But people are much more conscientious about where their dollars are going these days, I think, and particularly in New York.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Either of you guys, challenges, how you thrive in spite of those challenges?
Well, I think for us, especially now, finding a location that's going to be viable and at a price that's viable is also a big issue. Whether it's, down the road, you guys are going to have the same issues coming up, perhaps when your lease ends or whatever. I've signed many leases here, but the original landlord was a lot easier to work with. It's, they always say, if you don't own your building, you'll never survive. It's a small business, but that's usually unreachable, of course. Strand does own their building, but even they struggle in a way, because they've got such a huge overhead. They've grown so large. I think that's always going to be a problem too. Amazon is definitely a big impact on not just books, but every retailer in the whole wide world, because they're in every facet of retail. But maybe there's and you're right, people are always saying like, I don't want to support that, but I want to be here with you. I think the fact what we have to offer is not only the personality that we bring, but also the impulse aspect, which is like what we curate, what we select, and what we bring to the shelves that people don't even know they want. If they're looking for a very specific book, they're going to find it on Amazon a lot faster, and it'll be delivered the next day conceivably. And we can't beat that, or they'll get it electronically in 5 minutes. So we have to steer our selections to things that are impulsively, will reach people on that basis. And although and what Emmett was saying, I have to agree with you that there is a balancing act over what we feel is important and what actually sells. But you'll find that I found over the years I've been here, you could cultivate your audience to the point where they're going to get to the experimental level with you, and it's whether it's cultivating, huh?
Oh, I said definitely. I agree.
Yeah, and I've done that over the years. I mean, I've literally, I don't just cater to the public. I'm much more interested in cultivating them in a way, and there are many categories that weren't that strong. I also respond too, so there are certain areas that I've expanded enormously. Like books, but I made a whole giant shelf unit just of books that are either memoirs or poetry or fiction by women authors, which I get so many people just like go straight there and just get the books fly off the shelves. And there's so many challenges with being a retailer in general, and in particular. It would be so nice if there were if it wasn't rigged against us the way it is, because people will say, and I disagree 100%, that if a business, small or large, can't survive, it's because it's just not valid. It's just, but it's on the contrary. I think it's reason we might not survive is because the system is is rigged against us, really, in a way.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, for example, when it comes to real estate, it has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with buildings in New York costing tens of millions of dollars. My previous landlord paid tens of thousands of dollars for the building many, many years ago, but the new landlord paid 10 or 20 million. So now they have to say, you can't afford what we need here, and it's psychological almost too. But the point is, really, there's very few businesses, even restaurants, that can survive, especially in the midst of COVID, et cetera, with the kinds of prices these guys need to get in order to pay their mortgages, these real estate investors, et cetera. So, there's very hard to insulate yourself from that. I mean, there's sometimes we get lucky, we find the right situation that works for many, many years, but or you sponsor your business with there's only so far you can go with regard to fundraising. St. Mark's, many others, Coliseum, they managed to come back and forth, and then they're all gone, because it just was never, the prices just weren't realistic. That is to say, the square footage prices,
Emmett, do you want to add observation about challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the question of Amazon is interesting to me because, as far as I know, Amazon doesn't have a totally expansive artist book section. So I think that, for the type of stock that I have, it is mostly still independent booksellers and that sort of thing. And I could be naive to something else, but I think that more it's the overall sort of attitude towards books, as another sort of like fast, I'm just thinking about like fast fashion and all of that stuff, sort of taking away from not to sound too sentimental about it, but the integrity of the object, I suppose, which is obviously so central to what we are about with a book as an art object. Jim, what you said really resonates with me about, having to sort of try and sell something that people don't know that they want yet. that's a really concise way of, putting something that I definitely experience at the store. And so I think that something else that's very important for us that can be challenging is contextualizing our store, our organization overall, and the stuff that we carry for people who may not come in with the knowledge or the vocabulary to sort of like know exactly what they're looking at. And obviously you don't need to have education about artist books to enjoy an artist book that's in front of you. That's definitely not what I'm saying, but rather the context gives it so much more, so many more angles to approach it from.
That's great. Interesting. Thank you, Emmett. A quick but difficult question from the audience before I move on to another one that I wanted to raise with you. Could each of you talk or identify a book that you love in all caps that is on sale right now at your store?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna.
Jim said he has an advantage, Jim, because he's right there.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say the same thing. Well, I feature the ultimate artist book person, which is Blake. He was like famously, all of his books in his time were art books, literally. And he, as you know, and so I have a whole big, section of Blake, and I have him up there on the wall next to Bob Dylan on the music section too. I even
you have to identify a book. You're cheating, Jim.
So yeah, I know. I guess I would go with the portable Blake because I love the fact that the particular selection. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is my favorite book, and I frequently shove that down customers' throats because I love this satirical little book of Blake's that appears in most any collection, including Patti Smith's own collection, which was sold out of, which is another favorite. But I'm cheating again. But I love this one because it also has a wonderful little interview with Blake from a German journalist in his day back in 1820 something, which reads like a Bob Dylan interview, which is why I had to have them together there. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's so much fun people often ask that exact question. Customers say, "What's your favorite book?" I don't know what I want, and I'll steer them. I'll ask them a couple of questions because, I want to get an idea of what they might like. But inevitably, I frequently will go right there to Blake, and it works over and over again. People gobble things up very, very, quickly. It works in part too because I guess I can offer them these things at such a great price. That always helps.
Emmett, Aaron, can you outdo Blake?
My selection is very different. I just had to jump off screen a sec to grab my copy that I have at home. This is one that we are selling a ton of, Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. It came out about a month ago. He's Scottish and he lives in the East Village. So he was kind enough to do a big pre-order campaign with us. He came and signed hundreds of books. He's lovely. His first novel, Shuggie Bain, won the Booker Prize and I think will be considered a modern classic. It's incredible. So this is his follow-up, Young Mungo. It's wonderful. We have many in stock in the store.
Thank you. Emmett?
I'm also cheating a little because this one isn't available, but I know it's going to be really soon. But it's called Atomic Sublime, and I'm going to put a link in the chat to it. It is an artist's book by two artists, Tammy Wynn and Lovely Umayam, and it is this, just speaking of sculptural, amazing artist book. I just sent it to the panelists. Maybe if someone else, wait, I know how to fix this, everyone.
Thank you.
There we go. It is about two places in the American Southwest, the Nevada test site and the Grand Canyon, and the different roles that those places had in developing nuclear weapons. So it's sort of a combination, art project, research project. We're getting a lot of stuff that's research based, and things like that are my personal favorite things that are, about science, and, regularly sort of like non-artistic fields being being translated into artist books. And this is just a perfect example of that.
Okay, great. So let me ask you, we're sort of beginning to reach the end of our conversation for now. I wanted to ask you about, well, a couple of things. First, future plans for your store. And use that an opportunity. I want you to use that as an opportunity to comment on on the future you see for independent bookstores in the city, and if that vision happens to be aspirational, then then explain what that vision depends on, what contingency that vision depends on.
Well, I touched on it earlier that we are basically need to figure out where we're going before the end of June. We have to sort of pack it up. There's practically no chance that we're going to be in this particular geography. But I feel like whether we wind up collaborating, we still have like 6 or 7 weeks before we have to pack the boxes. But I think basically, I think each of us would do well to collaborate with either either sharing or whatever. I don't think that online selling is really the way to go for us. I think it's not very gratifying. It's just to try to compete with Amazon that level doesn't really go anywhere. I think I don't know. I think that for bookstores in general, I think it's people still will always love books. I think unlike, for example, music is all online. I don't think that virtual books are ever going to really hit as big have such a big hit on us as virtual music, so to speak, which is downloading, or film or movies and TV. All that's easy to download. What's the difference does it make if it's a piece of vinyl or plastic or whatever? But it doesn't matter. But a book is an object, especially a printed matter, which is a treasure. It's a gem, and it's something that will go on and has been going around for thousands of years and will go on for many thousands of years going forward. Because there's something. It's a very special kind of package that I guess that maybe the materials don't have to be paper. They could be cotton. They could be anything. But the fact is, books as a package. The question is, us packagers, those of us who either publish or accumulate books to sell and hoard them in our stores. That's a challenge in terms of the sheer possibilities of space. Where New York is just so damn expensive right now, and maybe there needs to be better protection in the way of laws. Maybe we need to go through a kind of process. Maybe village preservation has to take on a kind of more powerful, like maybe you need to get military powers or something. Like I don't know.
Let us know how.
Maybe
just a fact, statistic to throw in there to complement what you're saying. It is interesting that ebooks, which not 15 years ago were being presented as the demise of physical books, after a very rapid increase in demand, just plateaued altogether, flatlined at things like 20% of all books or something like that, and has not budged from there. Emmett, Aaron, visions for the future of your stores and for the future of for a better future of independent bookstores. And I should point out that although it is true that people perhaps will always love books, that the trend, the independent bookstore trend in the city does not reflect an increase in love or even a constant love. So something to keep in mind, or at least, which way the lovers are shopping.
Erin, do you want to start? Yeah.
Sure. So for us, one thing that's very actively in the works, unrelated to books, but specific to our store, we're in the process of getting our full liquor license. So we will be doing some literary themed cocktails and stuff to complement our existing beer and wine menu. So that's in the works for us. And, you know, overall, I agree that the number of bookstores have increased in the city, but there are quite a few popping up. There's one, You and Me, that just opened in Chinatown. P&T Knitwear is about to open up in the Lower East Side. I've been in contact with a few other booksellers that are in the process of doing similar hybrid store cafes in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. So it is encouraging. We at Book Club are in the very early stages of exploring a possible second location as well. We do think that while it's tough for bookstores in the city, what we're doing in terms of a hybrid business makes it a lot more sustainable. And whether that's doing, zines or rare books or just anything that sets your store apart from what can just be offered online. We're offering not only drinks that are at margins much more favorable than books, but also because people sit in the store, it's become such a community space. And I think that's made it a really sustainable business model. And my understanding is of the new bookstores that are opening in the city, and even some that are kind of converting into bars as well. It's not that we all just want to be boozy, but it's a way to make, even though that's fun, but it's a way to make these stores really sustainable with New York City rents. It's a way to pay the bills. For sure.
Look at that, Jim. Maybe village preservation will not need an army after all. We can maintain our pacifist posture. Emmett, any comments on the future of your store and of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my aspirations are pretty, revolve around like what you're saying, Erin, being a community space, and that entails having a bigger space. So similar to what Jim is saying as well, having a space where people can sit and look at the books, having, a better space for programming, all that type of stuff. And on the flip side, I think that even with our limited space at the moment, we've found ways to cultivate quite a community around the store. And, Erin, you mentioned earlier having a wide array of ages who, come to your store, and that's true of St. Mark's as well. And I think that, that's something that is hopeful to me about the sustainability of independent bookstores of St. Mark's, this sort of, intergenerational aspect of it. And then additionally, I mean, I think that the appeal of print media, there's a lot of sort of nostalgia for 80s and 90s subcultures at the moment, just generally. And, people are into making, people have always been into making zines, but I'm seeing like a ton of people making zines, starting their own arts publications. And that is, really exciting. And I don't know, I also want to say that I have seen a lot of really exciting, digitally native projects come about recently. And, I would hope that those sort of, online zines, digital books that do just exist in an internet space can, grow as a form, as sort of a supplement and a complement to having, our physical books that we, love so much.
Wonderful. So we're almost running out of time. I'll throw one last question at you for you to grapple with succinctly. And that question is, why does your business and or independent bookstores in general matter to your neighborhood or to their respective neighborhoods? Why are we here? Why is there an independent bookstore day? There's no Amazon day yet.
Yeah, I think we change people's lives. I mean, we do have such a deep impact on their souls with this reading materials that they consume and tell us again and again what a tremendous influence that we bring to them. Whether it's just entertainment, aesthetic, or philosophic, or whatever it is, or it's all very meaningful to people. I get, and we're talking, as you said a minute ago, young and old alike, little kids and people who are still rediscovering or discovering things that really have a great deal of meaning to them. And so it's, I guess, as a community, I don't think it's just the local community. And the village is, it's like one of the most extraordinary communities in the world. I used to, when I was younger, I used to go around the world saying, where's the equivalent of the Greenwich Village in London or Paris or whatever? I never found anything equivalent, And I think as a community, though, part of what makes the village such an important community is the international flavor, the fact that we are a hub for the whole world. Manhattan in general is, but especially the village, and it's particular for artists and poets, et cetera, wacky people, but maybe part because the village is so accommodating to all kinds of nutty people like ourselves.
Emmett, Aaron, why your business matters to your neighborhood or independent bookstores in general?
Echoing what Jim said earlier, the aspect of discovery in a bookstore is just something that you can't find online. It's not an algorithm feeding you what you should read next. It's discovering something you had no idea you were interested in and suddenly want to read. And that's just something that has to exist in a physical space. So there's certainly that aspect. And for us in our little pocket of Alphabet City, that's about a 12-minute walk to the subway. It's providing a community space, a safe space for people to hang out, for, men, women, non-binary people to be comfortable being alone in a bar, which doesn't always exist everywhere in Manhattan. I think it's been such a delight to see people meet each other at the store, particularly through our programming. Before I opened the store, I lived in this neighborhood for 10 years, and I feel like I barely knew anyone until this endeavor came about. And now I'm watching people attending our spelling bee or drinking and drawing, and they're becoming friends with each other, and they're meeting their neighbors in a way, especially when we've all been locked in our apartments for 2 years. Everyone's kind of just open to discovering who their neighbors are. And I think that's just it's so essential. And there aren't a lot of spaces that are safe and accommodating and welcoming to do that. And a bookstore is one of those spaces.
Great. Emmett, you get the last word other than my goodbye.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I could, echo and repeat everything that you both have said. I think that we're all in neighborhoods that are also changing so rapidly. And so having, our spaces that are dedicated, at least in part, to preserving and continuing, histories of, like literary scenes, artistic scenes, different sort of countercultural movements in downtown New York is incredibly important. And, for me, I see people utilizing the store as inspiration for them, for their own artistic projects, for their schoolwork, for anything. And that is really special to me. And I think is, a really rewarding part of doing this. And I think that, bookstores in general, it's just so much concentrated information. It's like the densest, spot of just like all of these different ideas, in one place. And so of course you're going to get such, a rich sort of diversity of ideas from that. And I feel lucky to be able to see it.
Thank you, and thank you all. I think everyone in the audience would agree that we have ended up in a much more hopeful place than that we started out with my introduction. And thank you to our panelists for wonderful presentations about their respective bookstores. And I'm hoping that Jim will find a new place to continue for many more decades. His
you, Ron.
unoppressive endeavors, and we'll be in touch. I'll be writing about this in the coming days, and this program will be available by video. So thank you very much, and everyone have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.